we're going to talk about all the little imperfections and the little problems that come up in reef tanks. And I think I'd like to start it off by saying that I have felt this. I have grown this sentiment around social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever your flavor is, that there's a lot of dishonesty, even more, a lot more than other hobbies or pastimes when it comes to reef tanks, because you're not going to get the likes if you show a tank with algae. If you confess to, I got a little cyano in the corner, or my fish has a little bit of ick once in a while. You get the likes when your tank looks super natural. And this is a feeling that I've been growing inside of me for a long time, but it was actually maybe earlier this year I came across an article by Reef Builders UK editor Jeremy Gay, who, back in 2019, he drew a really great analogy between the current state of presentation of reef aquariums on social media and beauty magazine covers, right? Because those are all fake, right? There's all airbrushing and photoshopping and makeup and supermodels, and our reef tanks they're just not that way, man. They're just not that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good documentaries on social media now that I think a lot of the topics you can apply to reef keeping, especially since a lot of our online consumption of the hobby now is through Facebook and Instagram, right? And I think everyone can relate that when things like Facebook and stuff first started, people would post their ups and downs on it, because also the number of friends you would have was much smaller. Your reach, wasn't really that big. But over time, people started to always present this perfect side of themselves and don't take pictures of the bad times. But the effect was that everyone's watching you on social media and they think your life is perfect. And then they start to feel bad about their own life because their own life isn't as perfect as the one, of you always on the beach or whatever. And we all know now that is not truth. That's not an accurate representation of that person's life, right?
I'm not convinced that we all know.
Maybe we consciously know, but our subconscious still...
I had to unfollow several coral vendors who made me feel shitty about my reef tanks. Because they had such, optimized camera settings on in their photographs, and they were taking pictures with a yellow orange fish. They're under blue light, and I'm like, man, those colors are freaking crazy. Wow. Every time I'd be like, oh my God. And then even though I know this, I have to remind myself of this, that what I'm seeing is highly manipulated presentation of reef tanks and aquarium corals. And when I walk over my corals, set the light just to blue, put on some orange glasses, whoa, my corals look amazing. They look incredible.
Yeah.
But when we see these pictures over and over, even if we instinctively know that those are highly manicured presentations of corals and reef tanks, man, it starts to sink in. And there's several, social media accounts that I had to unfollow because they made me feel bad about my reef tanks, even though I know all this stuff.
Well, what was the quote in that article about beauty magazines?
Little girls should not read beauty magazines.
No, something about don't read beauty magazines because they'll only make you feel ugly.
Yeah. This was really an issue with self-esteem regarding, younger girls that were growing up and seeing these images of, idealized beauty standards. And there is a one-to-one translation from beauty magazines and self-esteem of, the body image, and today with social media and your self-esteem and your enjoyment of your own reef tank.
Yeah, I mean, not to veer off topic, but a good analogy for me was, and I think some people out there with young kids can relate, when you have a baby and you go into the initial throes of parenthood, and your kid's not sleeping and you're struggling, and you always had that one friend that you'd go talk to, and they're like, oh no, our kid's perfect, everything's perfect, and then you would feel so crappy, like, oh, maybe I'm a horrible parent. And then there would be cracks in the veneer where all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I was cranky, I didn't get much sleep last night. Oh, why not? And then you start to realize, like, some people are not into airing their dirty laundry, and so it's like almost not even on Pinterest or social media or Instagram. It's like even in person, some people, like, this is how they function, is they always put their best out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for someone like me who
fake
likes
it till you make it.
Yeah, and for me, like, I like to vent about, hey man, I'm really struggling, because that's what friends are for, right? But I feel like it's the same in the reef keeping now, especially when most of your interactions with other hobbyists is online, right? It's not so much in person, at least not for me as much anymore.
Right.
And yeah, I get it, man. I had that feeling just this week where I was on Instagram, and it's like all these close-up shots of these perfect little beautiful corals that have crazy names, and every photo is like a photo shoot of the reef tank. It's not just somebody pulling out an iPhone and taking a quick picture of their tank, and you start to have doubt about your own tank, or questioning what are they doing, what are their tips and tricks, like, and you start to hammer these people. You see these comments like, well, what are you doing, what do you feed your corals, and yeah, it can be discouraging, I think.
I've been creating original reef aquarium content, since I was in college. So, like, let's just call it 15 years. I've been professional at Reef Builders since 2008. And it's actually really natural to want to clean the glass and scrape out some algae and present the aquarium as nicely as it can, right? Like, I don't want to crystallize a moment and my aquarium's looking mediocre. I want to show, I want to put the best foot forward. But more recently, I've really become cognizant of this, dichotomy between trying to present the tank as beautiful as possible, so if people are inspired and people say, wow, Jake, your tank looks so great, but I'm making more concerted efforts to actually show mostly in my videos, like, hey, you know what, I got some Aptasia over here, I got a little bit of Valonia, I got a little bit of algae. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think too, the other side of it is that we always latch onto these reef keeping demagogues, right? These experts over time, and those have come and gone. You and I have seen our fair share of them. And the other side of the coin is, like, as soon as somebody is considered some expert and a go-to person, I also think a lot of those people back off on airing their own dirty laundry, right? Or their own problems, because they're out there giving advice to people, and they don't want to come off as like, oh, well, I got ick in my tank, and but it's the other, it's like two extremes, right? Because I don't want to trust somebody who's going to give me advice when I don't have any concrete evidence that they're keeping a reef tank. And we had those type of personalities in the hobby quite a bit too, where you got these people giving advice to everybody, and yet I've never seen a picture of their reef tank, but somehow we all declared that person to be expert and deserving of attention. But on the flip side, if I do see pictures of your tank, it's I do like those experts that talk about failure, right, and talk about experiments that have gone wrong, more so than somebody that's just always preaching and never talks about the things that are wrong with their own tank either.
I'll confess, I'll talk to you about having some issues and experiencing some losses, but my way of coping with setbacks in my aquariums is to bury that like a man. Put it in the box. Don't mention it. Just move on. Not act like it never happened. Like internally, like I learned from the experience. But it's painful to talk about the fish that I've lost, or the corals that I've had issues with. But yeah, I have a small list of like almost every problem and issue that people think are the end of their reef tank, and that they're not. So do you have any that you want to start with?
Yeah, sure. For me, I mean, I think this one's on the top of your list too, but well, so for me, the big ones are obviously fish diseases and algae management.
Well, let's take those one at a time.
Sure,
Let's
yeah.
talk
Pick
about
one.
probably one of the biggest in the reef aquarium hobby, and I would say that's cyanobacteria.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that people who have never gone on diving on a reef don't realize that there's always some place on the reef where detritus builds up, kind of concentrating nutrients in one spot, and there's little patches of cyano.
Yeah. It's always funny to see those turfs. They're almost a little more turfy at times too.
They'll get
on the
thick and
substrate.
become kind of a biofilm, and they might have filaments kind of coming off, but I have never lost a coral to cyano. I have cyano in, I don't know, a handful of my tanks. I got 2 tanks that, they're kind of prone to it. Strangely, they're bluer lighting tanks. And it's like my LPS tank and my Euphyllia aquarium. Man, they have some pretty persistent patches of cyano. Then they're in line with several other displays that never display it. But thankfully, these are also bluer tanks, so I don't really have to perceive the redness of the cyano nearly as much. I blast it off, let the mechanical filtration take care of it, and I think nothing of it. I don't think I would ever use a cyanobacteria treatment on an aquarium ever again.
So I'm going to disagree with you on that one.
Yeah.
So I have used cyano treatments in the past, only when it's gotten. So I've had it go out of control a few times. Where
Describe what that's like, out of control.
to the point
What
that
was the
it's-
metric where you're like, okay, I need to do something?
to the point that it's not only coating the sand but the rocks, and you're starting to choke out some of your corals. That has happened to me a few times when my I guess you could say just my water quality and my nutrients were so out of whack, right, that usually when I've been neglectful and let my nutrients bottom out. But your mileage might vary, but so don't heed my advice. But I just never had a bad experience with like a chemicline.
Sure. No, me neither.
It's for me, it's just a treatment to get rid of a cyano that I find annoying. It's not the end of the world that I have cyano, but I'll do it and then it's gone. I had a time in my reef keeping tenure that it would always show up in like the spring. And It was almost like when I would open up the windows and, the Georgia pollen was taking over. Like I think I brought this up years ago where I was convinced that it was a result of just spring, like something in the air or whatever.
I think a lot of reefers would resonate with that statement.
It's, and I can't, I can't prove that, but it was just just every spring I'd get a cyano outbreak, and then I just got to the point where instead of battling it slowly, I just chemi-cleaned and move on, with my life.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. There's very few dangers in treating cyanobacteria with some kind of red slime remover appropriately, right? It gets to a certain level, and you know what you need to do to your tank to prevent its growth, but you use something like chemi-clean to just kill it. just kill it
and
off.
don't go into it blindly, right? Remove as much
Yeah.
as you can before, and aerate the hell out of your tank while you do it. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
there's with treatments, there's no free lunch.
Right.
There's definitely no free lunch. But if you have little patches of cyanobacteria that are persistent but also contained,
Oh yeah,
it's literally nothing to be concerned about.
no.